Hayeyeye baba yangu we, mama yangu we. Hayeyeye dada yangu we, kaka yangu we. Dada we, jione mwenyewe.
What's up, family? This is Matre checking in, Love Bravely podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. This episode is being released today, January 20th, 2025, and was recorded over the last week as a reflection on the unusual timing of today's presidential inauguration, lining up with Martin Luther King Day. We'll be exploring the possibility that Dr. King's presence may be offering us a particularly important invitation at this moment in time. Thank you so much for joining us. To connect with more Love Bravely music and projects, visit us at lovebravely.substack.com. And to support this work, check us out at patreon.com/lovebravely.
Damu binadamu sisi tuko na hamu, tafsiri nyingi hazimsumbui mwenye akili. Toke enzi za mababu zetu binadamu walioishi enzi zile.
This coming Monday is Inauguration Day in the United States, and this year, Inauguration Day also coincides with Martin Luther King Day, MLK Day. And when I first heard that these two were lining up this year, it felt really surreal. I felt how strange that seemed, Martin Luther King Day lining up with this particular Inauguration Day that feels so distant and so disconnected from his work. And then as I continued to think about it, I started to feel the possibility of something more meaningful in terms of these 2 days lining up this year. And I started to think about Dr. King's work and legacy. And the feeling started coming that maybe this is a particularly important day to feel his spirit and legacy strongly with us. And today, thinking about it, I've started to have this sort of image in my head of Dr. King standing with us at that threshold this Monday. Standing present, and the way I'm feeling it is both with support and encouragement, and also as an invitation. And that invitation for me is around going a step further and allowing this day and this beginning of this next presidency that has held, so much fear for many of us, allowing myself to really hold the question of how can I take a next step in my own commitment to justice? How can I take a next step in my own commitment to racial justice, to what Dr. King stood so strongly for and gave his work and life in service of? And what parts of myself do I still need to work with? Do I still need to look at, to work at transforming in order to really be able to participate more fully and support more deeply this movement towards justice? And how do I show up for all the different kinds of challenge and crisis that we're facing in this time that we're living in? And the question that really connects to all of these questions: how do I take a step further in my own relationship with what I would call the force of love? Something that was so present at the core of Dr. King's life and work. And I can feel, as I think about him standing at that threshold this Monday, standing with us, I can feel this presence of what Dr. King committed his life so strongly to. this understanding and relationship to love, not as a sentimental thing, not as the experience of liking something a whole lot or our preferences around something. But we can feel it in Dr. King's presence that he had a relationship to this deep power, this deep heart force. And we can begin to, through his example, through his life, his work, his presence, his speech, his words, we can begin to feel that presence of what it was that he was connecting to that was supporting his life, supporting his courage, supporting his strength. And that presence of love as a force feels, for me, like an important thing to have present this coming Monday. And an important thing to be working with and looking at and thinking about how I can strengthen my own relationship to it, not only this Monday, but in general in this time that we're living in. And I'm thinking about what this shift looks like from fear to love. You know, as I reflect on my own thoughts and feelings over the last month or more, really since the election, and thinking about, this time period leading up to the inauguration, I can feel how much I'm relating to the inauguration and the beginning of this presidency with fear. How much fear I feel around this presidency. How much fear I feel around the time we're in and all of the intense things going on at one time, affecting people so deeply, hurting people so deeply. And I can feel that fear, and I can feel my fear around this Monday and this inauguration. And I'm really interested in what it can be to work towards turning to love, to this force of love that Dr. King helps bring to light so powerfully, as a real presence that we can connect with. And I've been thinking about this project, Love Bravely, and how the original inspiration for this project, the essence of this project, is around trying to more deeply understand what that force is and being in a conversation around and a practice around cultivating our relationship to that force. And what's the way that we can work with that force in this time that we're living in? And so I've been thinking about, what is it that Dr. King and others are pointing to so strongly? I've been looking at some different quotes from Dr. King over these past few days. One thing that he said is that love is the greatest force in the universe. He also said love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into friend. What is this thing that he's pointing to that is so powerful? And that we can feel in his presence, undergirding his work, giving it its power, right? We can feel it in the way that he speaks and in the way that he moved through his life and led and courageously took steps forward. And we can feel it in the presence of other people in history who have worked really deeply with love. Two iconic figures, historic figures who have, who we hold in a certain regard around working with love in this way are Dr. King and Mahatma Gandhi. And I've been thinking about Gandhi as well, and how he called the principle at the center of his work. The word is satyagraha, and one of the ways that he referred to that principle is love force. And so these figures, these people who inspire us and who have taken such incredible steps in courage and in supporting real transformation in the direction of justice and greater wellness for human beings, they were pointing to something that was the support and the foundation of their work. And we can feel it, right? We can feel it. It's not an abstract thing that we feel disconnected from. We can feel that something's being pointed to that is deeply powerful. We can feel this love that is mighty, that is a mighty force, that isn't a sentimental thing. And so I'm interested in a further exploration of what that actually is and bringing that conversation out into the open more and saying, what was that Dr. King was working with so deeply that actually was the thing that gave him the strength, the courage to be who he was and do what he did? And again, it's not only Dr. King and it's not only Gandhi, these iconic figures. What if each of us is called to work with this force of love and each of us is working with it? And what if the more that we become aware of it consciously, the way that Dr. King was aware of it consciously, the way that Gandhi was aware of it consciously, what if the more we become aware of it consciously, we can choose to develop more of a relationship to it? And I'm thinking a lot about how this Love Bravely project and this Love Bravely podcast feels specifically connected to this time that we're in, right? When I think about this work, a lot of times what's been coming to me is, what does it mean to work with love in this time? Or what's needed in this time of so much challenge, in this time where so many of us are feeling the falling apart of things and we're feeling crisis from all sides? What is needed?
Dr. Martin Luther King once said a curious thing about the moment in time when he found himself alive. He said there's trouble in the land and confusion is always at hand, but if I'd ask for anything, I'd ask to live in this time. Dr. Martin Luther King once shared a powerful thing. He spoke about the moment in time in which he lived. He said there's trouble everywhere, yeah, confusion and despair, but if I could ask my God for anything, I'd ask for this. Please let me live in this time of change. Please let me live when this planet comes away. Please let me live when my heart can do its work. Please let me live when I can help transform this earth. This is the time.
And for me, as I think about that question, it keeps over and over again coming back as a response to that question, that there is another step that we're being called to take in our relationship to this force of love. And so I'm interested in what that step looks like in my own life. And what does it look like to be in conversation with other people about what this force is? What is it actually? Because we're not talking about an abstract thing. And, the common thing in our culture is the moment we hear the word love, we dismiss it as something that, yeah, it's good, but also it's kind of cliche. And it's definitely not the thing that like we're going to bring in to the conversation on CNN when we're talking about a global crisis, right? That would be naive. And yet, the figures who we know have had the deepest capacity to really bring change into the world and to take things further in the direction of justice and equality, of peace, of wellness. These figures all were working with love at the center of their work. They were all working with something beyond the word love. They were working with something we can feel, that we have this word that we use for it, right? These quotes from Dr. King using that word, Gandhi using the word love force. But what if we put the word aside for a moment and just say there's something we can feel? It's a power that the human heart can connect with, can hold, and can allow to move through it as a way of touching into another level of strength, another level of courage, and a commitment to offer all that we have towards the greater wellness of those around us. This quality that we can feel in Dr. King's presence, this quality that we can feel in Gandhi and so many others, that we can feel in our own presence, in our own hearts, when we allow ourselves to be in that deeper space of feeling, and opening to empathy, to feeling what another feels and having it affect us, allowing it to affect us in a way that we prioritize another's needs as our own need. And to even be able to do that for those we might disagree with. And this is where, like Dr. King says, there is no way forward without love. The only force, he said, that can make an enemy into a friend. What if there is no way forward without starting to change that view that says this is just sentimental and naive, and starting to actually take this force seriously, very seriously? And part of that is that we also start to take very seriously the importance and the essential practicality of inner development, of the human being capable to develop ourselves inwardly the same way we develop our intellects or we develop our muscles, that we can develop our heart force. The same way that we create new technologies, and we use the word technological advancement, and things are getting more and more advanced. What if we can also advance ourselves in terms of our capacity to connect with this power that these great figures are pointing us towards? What if we're actually able to cultivate a greater capacity for compassion? What if we're able to cultivate a greater capacity to put aside, first to see our own fear and the way that might make us react and respond, to see it and see that's not actually the deepest truth of who I am. That's a surface level response. And I can actually do the inner work, just like I would do the work to cultivate my muscles by lifting weights. I can lift the weights of using my will, my choice, to say I'm going to turn from that first initial response to something deeper. I'm going to turn towards my own heart. And it's uncomfortable. Just like lifting weights is. Just like studying hard and cultivating our intellects is. And I know it so strongly in myself. I'm seeing it all the time. How I feel my patterns, the way that it would be more comfortable to do something in a way that keeps perpetuating my fearful response. I'm remembering I took a class in college called Nonviolence, and the teacher was a scholar of Gandhi's work. That was his focus. And the course was really focused on understanding nonviolence through the lens of how Gandhi established it and worked with it. And one thing that's always really stuck with me about this course, we're studying about how to truly support social change and social justice in the world. And there was the course itself and all the books that we studied and studying about Gandhi's philosophy and studying about Gandhi's life. And then there was a lab that ran parallel to the course that was a space where we were invited to work with the practices that allowed Gandhi to develop himself inwardly in the way that then allowed him to participate in these outer forms of enacting change, of enacting justice. And so essentially it was saying, yeah, we can study, we can learn about these things. And when it comes down to it, in order to be more effective participants in creating this other way of being human, in creating this other kind of world that we want to see, we actually have to go to the gym and do the inner work. We have to go in. It was called a lab because lab, that was the word for like the additional class time that went along with a course. But it's a great name for what we're talking about. The laboratory, the lab of inner development. Do we go into that lab? And in the case of Gandhi, there were different practices that he actually worked with and different books that he actually worked with to help him develop his inner life. And I'm sure it was the same with Dr. King. The most practical thing we can do is to transform our inner lives and to cultivate our capacity to participate more fully in creating the world that we want to see. And I'm reminded, maybe that's part of what feels so powerful for me. I'm reminded by feeling the presence of Dr. King and others like Dr. King. But right now in particular, leading up to this Monday and thinking about what does it mean that the inauguration lined up with MLK Day this year. And feeling in myself, something's starting to come, something starting to come. And thinking about Dr. King's work, feeling his presence, holding it as a question throughout the week leading up to this Monday. And more beginning to feel the presence of this force. And then I'm starting to feel, okay, yeah, this is what this project is about. The Force. I'm not talking Star Wars. I'm talking with Chuck Berry packed into song chords. I'm talking where Skywalkers were originally born out in the Bronx with a boombox and a piece of cardboard. What allowed some crowds to march forward? Not the type of thing you buy a Valentine's card for. Don't let an old lie minimize what your heart's for. Like trying to keep a rocket ship stuck in a carport. Nah, baby, it's far more. The force got neglected like a kid with a hard chore. That's why we had hip-hop, punk, and art for to break out the box, make them jump like parkour. Travel to Mars, searching port and starboard, but still we can't find the science not to start wars. So we're mapping new terrain to far shores, satellites through the rib cage to find what we're starved for. Yeah, I know it's a hard sport. Free climb the cliff of your mind, it's hardcore. But it's time, so we climb and we carry the heart's torch. Keep breathing, you can feel it, it's the force. So why do we put it to the side? And what if it's part of what's keeping us stuck in these patterns of certain kinds of power being at the helm, when it's this power that should be at the helm? But as long as these other forms of power are at the helm, that narrative is going to be strong that says, yeah, love's cool. You know, we'll take a day here and there to honor that MLK Day, and we honor this. But what if every day is MLK Day? Every day has to be MLK Day. Every day has to be a day to celebrate the force that was at the center of what allowed Dr. King to be who he was and to do what he did. And to celebrate that force is available to and accessible to and naturally in relationship to each of us. That this isn't reserved only for a special few. For Dr. King, for Mahatma Gandhi. This isn't only about looking at these historical figures and saying, wow, they really went far with what it meant to be a human being. They were so gifted in that way. And it's true, they were. And they're, iconic representations of what I'm talking about for a reason. And at the same time, we see it all around us. And all these people we're in relationship to in our own lives and in ourselves. And what if it wasn't so much that they were completely different than us, but what if they deeply worked with, believed in, committed themselves to, cultivated this force and their relationship to it? And what if their lives weren't so much for us to just put on pedestals and look at as like these people who had this capacity to make these great strides, but what if their lives were also an invitation to each of us to say, come meet me at this place? What if Dr. King is saying, come meet me? Come work with me at this level in your own way. Again, that's not meaning that each of us is going to carry out a life that looks like Dr. King's life. It's not saying that each of us is going to carry out activism in that particular way, giving speeches, being at protests. But it is saying each of us can connect with that presence, with that power in our own way, and then more and more make it a practice to see what our true version of carrying that forward is. And so we're in this really intense time when so many of us can feel so much challenge and crisis around us, coming from all different sides. And we have this deep feeling that we know things really need to change. And I'm saying, what if they can only change through changing ourselves so that we become more effective, more available participants, actually capable of participating in creating this other kind of world? So that, like this course that I took in college, we begin to see that if we want to do these certain things outwardly, that the way we find ourselves there is by doing certain things inwardly. And I'm thinking about this other quote from Dr. King that I've often heard quoted and that's always struck me, where he's talking about the nature of justice and the nature of power. And he says, justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. And oftentimes when I've heard this quote, I've thought about it in terms of something in the outer world. That justice is a force or a power that will correct when someone or something outside of myself is doing something unjust, is doing something out of alignment with love. But more recently, and during this week, as I've really been feeling Dr. King's presence and thinking about this coming Monday, I've thought about this quote in relation to my own inner life. And what does it look like to work with the idea of justice inside of myself? What is the power that can correct those things inside of me that stand against love? What are the parts of me that still continue to perpetuate the patterns that I don't want to see in the world? The parts of me that need to get transformed in order for me to be able to participate in the way I want to participate. What if justice begins inside of me with facing that which is not love and inviting forth a power that can correct that? The power maybe beginning with my own ability to choose, or with my own will to choose, to decide to look at that inside of myself which is not love, the injustice in myself. And not to condemn myself, because then the game is over. It stops there. The harshness closes a door. It doesn't change the thing. It just says, I see the thing and I'm going to call it wrong. But what if I see the thing and I say it's out of alignment with love? And how do I connect with love to help correct or transform the fear, the patterns, the confusion, the unwillingness, the stuckness, anything that, like Dr. King says, stands against love. And so I'm thinking about justice as an inner work that then takes outer form. And definitely it is in the outer world as well. Justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. And we need that power to stand against everything that is not love in our outer world as well. And I know that I'm more capable of doing that when I'm also doing it in myself first, or in parallel. It's not so much to do that and have it be a finished work. Even these iconic people that we're referring to in history who worked so deeply with this truth of love weren't perfect. They were in an ongoing practice, so there's parallel practices, and anything I'm doing to participate in the outer change, I have to also be doing in myself continually underneath it as a foundation, a guiding foundation. It's like a parallel thread underneath, a parallel foundation that is giving this support to anything that I might be able to do outwardly. And I've found this to be powerful and inspiring and also really challenging. The challenge of looking at the parts of myself that are not love. And the challenge of trying to work through and transform my own fear and patterns. And so I find myself really feeling the need for courage. And I think that's another reason for the name Love Bravely. You know, an invitation to myself to be courageous, to be brave, and also a calling for the kind of love that can help me be brave. You know, as we see through these examples of Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. King, and so many others, it was the relationship to that love that supported them being as courageous as they were. And their lifelong commitment to that relationship helps us see that this is possible, that it's actually possible to grow ourselves as human beings in this way, and that so much more becomes possible as far as what we can become and what we can do when we really choose to work with this force. Thank you all for tuning in with us. I'm really grateful to be able to keep building with you all, keep exploring these ideas and these next steps forward together as we all keep finding our way in this significant moment in time we're living in. I want to thank Laura Summer for this episode's beautiful artwork and give a big shout out and thank you to our Patreon community for helping us make this all possible. Love Bravely really is a community-supported project, and you can help us keep this work going and building by joining us at patreon.com/Love Bravely. And if you want to stay tuned with new music and new projects, check us out at lovebravely.substack.com. Looking forward to sharing more music and more artwork, more projects, more conversations, more podcast episodes soon. Much love, much thanks. Peace.